Namaste. Heart to Heart, Volume 1 by Pujya Sri Chariji Maharaj. We now continue this series with the next talk titled Oneness. Silence is the language of God, and therefore, when we wish to communicate with the divine existence, divine planes of existence, we become silent or try to become silent, and this we achieve in meditation. At the human plane, unfortunately, we have to have recourse to speech because here silent communication is impossible. I think the Tower of Babel of the Christian tradition exemplifies not merely the fact that speechless communication is impossible, but that with the proliferation of tongues, which only means not so much language as the degrees to which we hide our thoughts, it becomes even more difficult to communicate. Because when people speak the truth, communication is easy. If two people are totally liars and nothing they say is the truth, there can be no communication at all because speech becomes meaningless. And if in the middle there are various mixtures of truth and lies, sometimes we ourselves forget which is the truth and which is the lie. It's not a joke. One who has been a liar knows how difficult it is to sustain a lie, because he can tell a lie to one person about a particular truth, and then in that person's presence he may tell a different lie about the same truth and get caught. So lying is not easy. To tell the truth is very easy. Lying is very difficult because it requires behind it memory. What did I tell Ross? What did I tell Hillary yesterday? About the same thing, you see. Then I have to look around and see if both of them are present here, and then find out a third lie which will convince both of them. Lying is an art, a science. It requires intelligence. It requires the ability or the capacity to sustain. Therefore, this funny association of great intellectual development with big lies. Simple people cannot tell lies. You rarely find a farmer or a cowherd capable of telling a lie. Even if he decides to tell a lie, he won't be able to tell it when he is faced with the situation. He will blurt out the truth. So, the more sophisticated a society, the more lies in it. It is an unfortunate, shall we say, parallelism that the higher we advance in the intellectual level, the more sophistication we achieve, the more we become liars, cheats to others and to ourselves. The more we become simple, in tune with nature, the more truthful we become. Because we cannot possibly know what is a lie at this stage. It is like children. Often I have given this example of a child. It does not know how to lie. When we teach it to tell lies, where is daddy? He is gone to office, but he is inside smoking a cigar. And then when the child says, but dad, you tell me not to tell lies, but now you ask me to tell a lie, that you are not here. You say, shut up, I am your father. So you see, now authoritarian lying is permitted. The more powerful you are, the bigger the lies you can tell. If you have no power, if you are nothing in society, you cannot tell lies. Therefore, the highest in the land can tell the best lies, the most lies. You see how the power structure, the ego structure, the intelligence structure all go together, and they only breed lies. And then, of course, like a juggler, you throw up a cup, you throw a second one, you throw a third one, and you are sustaining ultimately 9 or 10 or 11 cups. You have to go on doing it, otherwise they crash. So financial empires, power empires, they are to be sustained by putting in more and more of these corrupt inputs into them. Because if you withdraw something, like the juggler's cup come crashing, his empire comes crashing. This is why business empires, political empires built on lies, they cannot be sustained. Nor do they have a slow decadence, you see. They rise and abruptly one day they come crashing like a house of cards. So this is true. You can call it the psychology or the philosophy behind communication. That unless we become so simple that in each one of us there is nothing but him, then we speak with the voice of duality, my voice and his voice, my thoughts and his thoughts, my way of communication and the way of communication and his way of communication. what does constant remembrance or how does constant remembrance help us? Because the more we remember him, as Ross said, the more we forget ourselves. The more his thoughts come into us, the more his way of communications come into us. Our thoughts become purer and more divine. Our way of communications become more and more silent. That unless we become so simple that in each one of us there is nothing but him, then we speak with the voice of duality, my voice and his voice, my thoughts and his thoughts, my way of communication and his way of communication. What does constant remembrance or how does constant remembrance help us? Because the more we remember him, and Ross said, the more we forget ourselves, the more his thoughts come into us, the more his way of communication come into us. Our thoughts become purer and more divine. Our way of communication becomes more and more silent. Ultimately, we reach that stage when there is no more speech, it's all silence. You can see this between lovers. You know, I am always very fond of lovers for many reasons. In the beginning, there is lot of need for communication at the physical plane, verbal plane, a great deal of fumbling and all this associated activity. A great deal of talk, trying to convince each other of pure, eternal, undying love. So many things you see, but as the love matures, you find less and less communication is necessary. The physical communication falls off pretty soon. Verbal communication falls off also pretty soon. And if you two people have managed to continue in their love for say a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, they can just communicate sometimes with a glance or even without a glance. One glance of the eyes and they know what is being said, what is meant to be said. This miracle you can find in many old couples who have survived the onslaughts of time and circumstances and events. It is like a ship which in wartime sets out of port's mouth, goes round the world, is attacked by bombers, has to sustain itself through minefields, attacked by torpedoes, but limps home with its scars, very proud of itself. You look at it and you know what it is. So life begins with communication, because even a child, if it didn't cry, the first sign of life in a baby is its cry. When the mother cuts or the nurse cuts the cord, holds it upside down and slaps its back. I have never been in a delivery room, but I believe this is what happens. And the child lets out a squawk. If that squawk didn't come out well, people get worried, because it is the rush of air into the lungs of the baby, which has hitherto been sustaining itself through its umbilical cord with its mother self, lived on its mother. It was a parasitical existence. When it has to come into its own existence, it has to seek sustenance from the oxygen of the air around it. It has to learn to breathe. The first cry is the sign that it is able to take in the air from outside, breathe in the vitally necessary oxygen, and begin its own life as an independent entity. It is also the first communication which assures its mother and those around it the child is alive. So you see, communication fulfills two needs, or shall we say speech fulfills two needs. One to say all is well, I am here, the other to communicate something. That's why often you find children going in the dark, very brave appearance, hands in their pockets, fists balled up, trepidation in the heart, but whistling away like hell, you see, just to prove that they are very brave. The whistling is to make a noise to assure themselves that all is well. So communication is not only with others, communication can be with the self too. We need to communicate with ourselves. Often you find people speaking to themselves. What is daydreaming about? We sit and brood and muse in sunshine, build castles in the air. It is a form of communication of myself with myself. Either I am trying to reassure myself, or I am trying to sort of boost myself up into something else, or I am trying to energize myself into some activity. To achieve something, give myself courage, or even congratulate myself on such achievements as I think I may have achieved. So there is communication with the self, there is communication with the other, and there is communication with the ultimate. I don't know, I have never attended courses on communication. There are, I believe, nowadays in modern times, institutes of communication. I don't know what they teach, but this is my analysis, that there are 3 levels of communication: with the self, with the other, and with him. With the self, speech can be silent in the form of thoughts, daydreams, night dreams, during sleep, when the subconscious is trying to communicate with my communication, give me messages, give me warnings, give me support. Communication with the other in speech, in physical ways, is also perhaps, as we develop in our love for each other, falling or lapsing into silence. But there the only communication can only be silence. We cannot possibly speak with God. Therefore, as a true Sahaj Margi, one cannot possibly believe in all the myths and stories that the prophets of the past spoke with the God. I totally disbelieve such nonsense, whether it be a Hindu tradition or the Christian tradition or any other tradition in this world. One cannot possibly speak with God. God has no voice. God has no language. So how can you speak with God? Therefore, we find this anomaly that these traditions speak of their great savants, their saints, their seers, their prophets having gone into desert or withdrawn up into the mountain peak, and they communicated with the God through the act of meditation. And then we find a little lie creeping into the situation that when they come back, either they said or somebody said and so had spoken with God. So when we want to communicate with the ultimate, it is only through meditation, through stealing ourselves into silence. Now, does this silence mean only verbal silence, where our mouth is closed and we make no noises? I think not. I think we have to go deeper and deeper into various hidden layers of silence, where first the voice is still, next the mind is still, third perhaps even the soul has to be still. You know, sometimes when you go up high into the mountains where there is nobody, nothing, you can hear silence literally. I have heard silence, and sometimes it is frightening, especially at night time when you are alone. You keep the window open, gaze up into the sky, the brilliant stars with a brilliance surpassing what we ever see when we are in the plains, and there you bear this awesome stillness, you know, and you yearn for some noise, even if it is only the creaking of a door to show that there is somebody next door in the next room. It can be frightening. Why is it frightening? Because we have lost touch with the reality with which we are trying to communicate. We don't know whether he is there. You see, one is frightened when one thinks one is alone. A child is frightened when suddenly it misses its mother. It looks for the mother, screams for the mother. Similarly, when we thought we are with him in this utter stillness, open emptiness, vastness of the sky, or the infinity of the ocean, suddenly a movement of fear comes, you know. You look around, there is nothing, not even a dog, not even a seagull on seashore. Even the surf seems to have stilled its voice. Hurriedly we get up, our skins become prickly with hidden fear, and we rush back seeking company. Now when you cannot find his company, you have to seek this company. You see, human beings are not meant to be alone. We are supposed to be in some way like the animals. We seek companionship. What is the sign of a developed soul? That he can be more and more silent in specific, silent in the innermost depths of the self. He can be alone, more and more alone, more and more totally alone, until he is divorced even from his own self. You see, the aloneness is not the aloneness of the physical body, that there is nobody else with me. The aloneness is not the feeling of aloneness, that I am here and nobody else is with me. The alone is not the aloneness when I know that I am here and nobody else is with me, because there is I, the vertical, which says I am here. There is two I's. The final aloneness is when I don't know anything. I don't know that I am there. I don't know that I am not there. I don't know that I am silent. I don't know that I am not silent. There is nothing to cognize or appreciate or perceive. I believe it is at that level one can say that the presence that is present there is no longer the presence of yourself, but it is the presence of Him who is always within us. So this is the mystery behind communication, and how from communication we come to all these ramifications that I have just tried to talk about, and it is a plodding, laborious thing. Now from this I want to develop into something else. What is meditation? Because I find now new people are coming. Today I had a peculiar experience that during the meditation, which was utterly still, I seemed to hear some people muttering something, possibly doing some prayers. It is possible to hear when you are totally still what is going on in another person's mind. Babuji calls it reading. I have often found this, that some Abhyasis, even when they meditate, they cannot give up the former practices of chanting. Some do the Hindu chantings, prayers, mantras, some do the Christian. So when we meditate, if you clutter up the mind with another activity like thinking of a japa or a mantra or whatever it is, now there are two things struggling and neither will succeed. Because with one part of your mind, you are trying to introduce stillness by meditation. With another part of the mind, you are trying to create an activity of thought, a stream of thought. Naturally, they are opposing each other. Also, the fundamental law that the mind should be one, if you divide it into two, the power of the mind is split into two streams, comes into operation. Therefore, we fail in both activities. So this simplicity means two things. One, simplicity, we are aware of that a machine works with 100 parts. Then the same machine is designed with 50 parts. It is less. It is more simple, less complicated. The same machine designed with 25 parts, it is even more simple. Ultimately, we design machine with just one part. It is the simplest. And if that machine can be like the sun, the solar sun, which is generating its own fuel in a fantastically simple chain of atomic activity, it burns itself and in its process generates its own fuel all the time, and throws out immense quantities of energy. I believe it's of the order of 2 billion tons of fuel is burned per second. And yet the sun is going to be here millions and millions and millions of years after we are dead and gone, when it can be a self-sustaining thing. It's absolutely the simplest. Now I think the perfect level of that, the perfection of this simplicity is God, who was neither created nor sustains himself with food, doesn't need exercise, doesn't need existence, therefore cannot die. We were born, therefore we shall die. The Vedas speak. He is indestructible because he was never born. That which is born must die. Maybe it lives 100 million years, but still it has to go. Therefore, inevitably, the physical universe must collapse because it was created sometime. That which was created in a point of time must have its end in another point of time. All that is different between it and him or me is the span between these 2 points, the length of time. Now I would imagine the simplest, most perfect example of the ultimate simplicity, that which was never created, which is indestructible, which is self-sustaining, which has no parts, no movement, no speech, no language, no thoughts, therefore organism to express any of this, God. So when we try to get into the simplification of our existence, as Babuji said, be simple and in tune with nature. We are only trying to go away from this complexity of the created thing to the simplicity and the eternity of the uncreated. Therefore, immortal, eternal, transcending time, space, causation, everything else. Now, if in this process we keep introducing other created things, whether gods, mantras, what have you, we are again going backwards. It's like pressing the car's accelerator with one foot and the brake with the other. Fortunately, no car has yet been designed in which this mistake can happen, because both are operated by the same foot. But suppose perversely somebody you know takes off the leg from the other pedal and tries, you will only damage the car. So what happens when we try to meditate with two systems or two gurus or two different warning things in our mind? Even if one is good in itself, we are damaging ourselves. Therefore, please bear in mind meditation only according to the system, whichever system you adopt. We have no quarrels with that. You want to go to Tai Chi, for heaven's sake do it, but do Tai Chi only. You want to do Islamic meditation, do only that. You want to do that given by Nanak, do only that. Don't mix two things, because each may be good but the mixture may be disastrous. Fire is good, explosives are good, the mixture is disastrous, isn't it? Except when necessary. So that is the second thing. In stealing the mind, we should not introduce other things. In meditating, we should not forget that we are going from complexity to simplicity, and start off with a little bit of this, a little bit of that, little bit of that. Christ for 10 minutes, Buddha for 10 minutes, Confucius for 10 minutes, Krishna for 10 minutes, and finally Master for 10 minutes. Some people are doing it even today, which only means we are cluttering up the whole thing with again a 5-part complexity, 4-part complexity, 3-part complexity. So no mantras please, no second object of meditation please. Now the need for one master, because if you have two, there is a diversion of loyalties. There is a diversion of love. It's like a man having two mistresses. Babuji always used to use this misal, as we say in Hindi example, that if a man has two wives, he is in trouble. One pulling this side, one pulling that side. Of course, if it is 3, it is horror. Break in tape saying, Babuji always used this example. So if you have two masters, you cannot have a master at all. As we say in Hindi, dhobi ka kutta na ghar ka na ghat ka. A washerman's dog belongs neither to his house nor to the river where he washes his clothes. When you want it here, the dog is there. When you want is there, the dog is here. So our minds becomes like that. So divided loyalties, twin streams of love, two things, they cannot exist in spirituality. That is why Babuji said, one master, one mission, one method. In the Christian tradition, they say the same thing. You cannot or shall not serve God and mammon. Two things cannot be served by us at one time. So mind pure, unclutter, meditation, thinking of the one thing that you are taught to think, no second thing. Third, one master, no second master. This is not a question of comparison, you see. Oh, why should I not think of the Buddha also? Was he not a great man? Yes. Then think of the Buddha when you want this. Keep your Buddha as your master. Meditate on Buddha. Read Buddhist teaching. It is not a question of good, you see. Like nowadays, there is this fashion that coffee is good when black, but milk should not be taken with it. Milk is very good. What's wrong with milk? But you should not put it in the coffee, isn't it? Salt is wonderful, but you do not put it in cake. Without salt, there is no taste. So this is why it is necessary to remember that in Sahaj Marg system, which is utterly simple, there is no room for a second thing, either a second mind or a second heart or a second soul or a second thought during meditation or a second method or a second master or second God. I cannot have the God of Buddhism and be a Sahaj Marg Abhyasi. I cannot have the God of Christianity and be a Sahaj Marg Abhyasi. I cannot even have the God of Hinduism and be Sahaj Marg Abhyasi. I can have only the God who is the God of gods, who has no form, no name, no attributes. The Param Tattva, as we call it in Sanskrit, to whom I am linked through my master, because my master is him directly. So please remember all these things. and if we practice this in the way in which it is supposed to be done, I am sure that not only will we become simpler and simpler, less and less communicative in the apparent and obvious ways, but more and more communicating with that which matters, with the source of all being. Ultimately, we merge with that being and all communication ceases. May it be so. Thank you for listening. Here we conclude this talk titled Oneness. In the next narration, we will commence our next talk titled Looking Inside.